Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 3 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 26, Morning. The small procession was the only thing moving in the city of 8 million people. Leading the procession up Wall Street was Samuel Wilson, his hard light wings folded against his back and his previous outfit replaced by a bodysuit almost identical to the one worn by Angel, albeit with the red portions changed to a dark blue. Wilson led 2 midnight black horses towing a caisson upon which a draped coffin rested, followed by a soldier from the president's guard, tapping the beat of the funeral march on his drum. Behind the drummer walked Superman, his uniform recolored black and silver, and Goliath, the medallion that let him walk in daylight glinting on his chest. Following them were Reed Richards and Steve Rogers, both in black versions of their normal outfits. James Rhodes, helmetless in his black armor, and Brian Braddock in a monochrome version of his Union flag-inspired outfit brought up the rear. The 2 horses and 8 beings were the only ones moving through the city, but New York was not deserted. The sidewalks were crowded with thousands of people, all standing in silence as they honored a hero who had fallen in battle. The few who tried to raise banners of protest or shout anti-mutant slogans quickly found themselves restrained and sometimes even gagged by the people around them. People who did not wish to see the ceremony cheapened by mindless theatrics. The procession halted in front of Trinity Church and the 6 moved forwards to flank the empty coffin, lifting it off the caisson and onto their shoulders. Another military man walked up and led the horses to one side, then the slow tap, tap, tap of the drum resumed as the 6 carried the coffin into the church. Clark stood by the side of the grave, looking down at the empty coffin. At the head of the grave, the priest recited the liturgy for the deceased, but Clark wasn't paying. The priest finished. Samuel stepped forwards and picked up a double handful of earth. Stretching his arms out, he slowly released it, letting it land on the coffin. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Clark whispered, a tear trickling down his cheek. Samuel landed on the raised podium at the end of Times Square and looked around. The assembled reporters looked back, as did his own multi-story image from almost all of the screens around the square. "Thank," he began, then paused a moment to collect himself. "Thank you for coming," he managed. "The loss of Warren Worthington III has hurt us greatly, but his legacy will continue. He flew the skies to watch over us, to protect us and shelter us. And now he flies in the skies beyond the stars. We will never forget him." For a long moment, Samuel remained silent while, as prearranged, the screens around Times Square changed, each one showing a different scene from Angel's superhero career. One screen showed him flying in formation with the gargoyles, effortlessly maintaining perfect position. Another showed him leaping out through the window of a burning building, a small child held protectively against his chest, while a third had him as part of the lineup of the in uniform, and mostly masked, Xavier Institute, laughing at something that Spider-Man had said. Warren was a true hero. Samuel resumed. He learned eagerly from others and was willing to share what he had learned without hesitation. I myself benefited from his teachings, as did many others. And now he has been taken from us. Taken before he could take the next step that was planned. Taken before he could assemble and lead a team of his own. Warren is gone, but his legacy remains. To honor him, I have taken on the mantle of the second angel. I know that I cannot replace him, but I can continue down the path that he blazed. I can honor him by picking up the burden that he can no longer carry and lead the team that was intended for him. The new team is being assembled even now. The New York Guardians will protect New York's citizens, helping the emergency services and those who protect the public. Warren Worthington Jr. has already provided a place for the team to deploy from, the Angel's Rest, as well as part of the funding needed for the team to function full-time. Soon, the Guardians will take up the task that Warren can no longer shoulder. We will keep his memory alive. To Warren. A man, an angel, and a true hero. For a long moment, the crowd was silent, then the applause started, scattered at first but building rapidly until the very air shook under its force. What? Samuel stared up at the skyscraper in bemused disbelief. Warren Jr. had assigned the top 10 floors of it to the New York Guardians, but Samuel hadn't managed to make any time to see it, asking Clark to glance at the blueprints and make suggestions instead. Now, he stared at the huge golden statue that stretched almost 5 stories tall in its own recess. The statue was obviously based on life and showed Angel in the process of leaping through a window, his wings unfurling as flames licked around the window frame, a child clutched to his chest as he carried it to safety. On his face, or at least the unmasked portion, was an expression of noble purpose and determination. "My God! I think it's a good likeness," Warren Worthington Jr. said as he stepped up beside Samuel. "And it's a statement. My son was a hero, saving others not for the fame and glory, but because it was the right thing to do." A blue and red blur plummeted down, firing a pair of web lines to turn its descent into an arcing somersault, landing smoothly before the duo. "Spider-Man." Samuel nodded to his, reluctant, second-in-command. "Falk. I mean, Angel," Peter replied. "Mr. Worthington. The team is waiting. Then we should go and meet them." Samuel agreed before turning to give Warren Jr. a look. "Do you want to come?" For a moment, Warren Jr.'s face was conflicted, then he slowly nodded. "Yes. I'd like to meet the team my son would have led, if you don't mind." "The more the merrier." Peter shrugged. "They're waiting in the main hall." The 3 men walked through the entry hall and Samuel stared at the central hollow glass pillars that descended through the raised ceiling to stop in the exact center of the hall, pillars that supported between them a shield with the letters NYG embossed on them. "Wait, what?" "Follow me," Spider-Man shouted as he leapt through the archway into the right pillar and promptly flew up the shaft. "A gift from Mr. Kent," Warren explained. "Grave-to-cliff shafts. There's a higher-powered one that the Avengers use as a launch catapult in Stark Tower. Come on." Samuel swallowed as they stepped through the arch, then he looked round as they gently rose into the air. "We're going slower. The faster you enter the tube, the quicker you ascend," Warren replied as they approached the ceiling. "Of course, there are safety systems in place to avoid collisions or, how did Spider-Man put it? Ah yes, pancaking." Samuel glanced down and his hollow wings twitched. "You had to say that, didn't you?" Warren Jr. laughed as they rose to the exit arch and slowed to a stop before drifting forwards at a rate that allowed them to simply step out. Sam looked round, then paused. "Clark. You on the team?" "Sorry, but no." Clark Kent smiled, turning away from the blue-skinned, red-haired girl he was talking to. "I was just checking on Telegirl, making sure that she's okay." "Who?" Samuel said blankly and Clark smiled. "Since I'm here, I might as well introduce you to your team. As most of them are full-time heroes now, they've agreed to let me tell you who they are." "Sure," Samuel said with a shrug. "I'm honored to meet you all. I'm Angel, formerly the Falcon. Out of uniform, I'm Samuel Wilson. How do you do?" A susurration of greetings met his statement, then Clark nodded to Spider-Man, who pulled off his mask. "Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Proportional strength, speed, and reflexes of a spider, I can also walk on walls, ceilings, and any other solid surface. I use web shooters to create my ropes and webs. I've been heroing for a while and know Kryptonian tech. I'll be going full-time when I graduate next week. I'm Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil," the man in the red bodysuit said. "Lawyer. I'm blind, but my other senses more than compensate. I can identify people by their heartbeats and have a sort of echolocation sense thanks to my hearing. I'm skilled in acrobatics and fighting. I use a multifunction staff that Superman upgraded for me. Angelica Jones, Firestar," the red-headed woman in the red and yellow bodysuit said. "I can generate heat and project it. I can also use it to fly. Name's Vance Astrovac, but you can call me Justice," the teenager in the dark bodysuit stated. "Telekinetic. Not quite on Miss Marvel's level, but she gave me a few pointers when Superman took me to meet her. He was offered a place at the Xavier Institute, but decided he preferred to go straight into a team." Clark added. "Jason Strongbow, American Eagle," the leather-jacketed man stated. "Enhanced strength and resilience, I can bench press 20 tons easy. Excellent crossbow shot and tomahawk user. Superman's friend Forge upgraded my crossbow for me. Edie Sawyer, Telegirl." The blue-skinned teen sighed. I can teleport myself and anything within 5 feet of me. Big guy knows my powers better than I do. We ran some tests and used sensors that Forge provided. Clark shrugged as everyone looked at him curiously. Telegirl's range is somewhat inversely proportional to how much she's teleporting. By herself, she can cross the globe, although she needs to know where she's aiming for. Each additional person cuts the range by about a third, cumulative, unless she chooses to strain herself, whereupon she'll need several days to recover. Damned if I know how he figured it all out. Edie shrugged. I only did a dozen teleports with the sensors. We've installed special angel pads across New York for her to use as targets. Clark added. We'd just finished the tour of them when you arrived. Samuel nodded. Honored to meet you all. I'm sure that you all need to settle in and I know that I need a tour of this place. We'll do the publicity stuff tomorrow, then start training and patrolling. Remember, we aren't cops, so brush up on your citizens' arrest skills and remember that if a cop gives an order, you follow it if possible. Clark. I've already sorted the payroll out. Clark smiled. Sam, there's a couple of things you need to know, then I'll be going. All right. Samuel said. Everyone else, dismissed for now. Meet back at 5 for dinner. The other members of the team nodded and started to drift away as Clark walked over to him. They're good people. If you vouch for them, I'm sure they are. Samuel agreed. So, what do I need to know? Well, for starters. Clark began as he pointed to a door leading to a small room. There's a door in there. For a moment, Sam failed to grasp the significance of the apparently pointless statement, then his eyes widened. Apocalypse stood in front of the window of the mansion, staring at the distant pillar of the shield base known as the Triskelion, the windows of the central section reflecting light between two of the armored, outer sections. A noise behind him made him turn round and he smiled at the sight before him. I see that you have completed your task ahead of schedule, my Sanes Chell. I hope you approve, my lord. Sinister smiled as he stepped round the winged figure that had preceded him into the room. I am proud to report that he is a complete success, better than I had expected. Oh. Sinister tapped the winged figure's shoulder and in response, he spread the metallic wings wide, displaying the overlapping angular feathers. The implanted arrays you provided work marvelously. Archangel's flight is now psionically enhanced, allowing him to break the sound barrier. He can also generate psionically forged feathers that he can launch at high speeds, or he can use them as swords for as long as they last, although they vanish after 5 minutes. His strength is enhanced to the point that he can bench press 10 tons while his senses have been boosted to the point that if it is in his line of sight, he can see it. The loyalty programs have settled perfectly, he now lives only to serve you. In short, a total success. Excellent work, my Sanes Chell. Apocalypse gloated. Archangel, kneel before me. Archangel took one step forwards, then dropped to one knee, bowing even as his wings folded themselves against his back. Thou art my Archangel of Death. Apocalypse proclaimed. Arise, my herald, first of my horsemen. Chapter 27, Graduation. Today is going to be quite interesting. Hank McCoy noted as he finished retying his tie and Principal Kelly nodded in agreement. The spectators were filing into their seats while the graduates were standing in ranks, ready to receive their certificates. Although most of them were clad in the traditional robes and square hat, the few amongst them not dressed that way stood out against the dark blue crowd. Scott Summers stood proudly in his black and yellow bodysuit, his visor covering his eyes and glowing slightly. Next to him stood Peter Parker in his red and blue web-patterned bodysuit, modified so that the New York Guardian's shield was on his right shoulder while his Xavier/L symbol was on his left. Earlier, he had shown off by running up and down the school wall, thus proving his identity as Spider-Man. Lance Alvarez, Fred Dukes, and Todd Tolinsky also stood proudly in their Brotherhood outfits, the tri-shield patches with their motto on their right shoulders. The fourth member of the Brotherhood, Wanda Maximoff, stood amongst the audience, talking to Laura and Chris Kent while a short distance away Alex Masters was grinning as almost a dozen girls crowded round him, making noises of admiration at the revelation that he was the hero known as Havoc. Just think of the publicity. Clark said from behind him and Kelly jolted, then spun round. "Make some noise, damn it!" he half shouted, waving a finger at Clark before realizing who he was talking to. "Sorry. Not in uniform today." Clark glanced down at his jeans and shirt combo, then looked round with an overly dramatic furtive air before slightly opening his shirt, revealing the House of El crest underneath. Hank and Kelly both laughed at the little display. "I decided that although I wanted to attend, doing so as Superman would pull the attention away from the people who deserve it." Clark smiled, one hand waving to indicate the graduates. "However, I asked for a favor and one of Governor Zed's men, Talden, is covering for me today in case any emergencies happen. Here's hoping for a quiet day." Hank agreed while Kelly pondered the changes that were occurring thanks to the Kryptonian presence. "You heard that the Solar Defense Fleet is being officially formed tomorrow," Clark added. "Admiral Feyreul will be leading it, although it won't be very big for quite a while. They're using a salvaged Type 5 embassy as the central nexus of what they hope will become the new solar shipyards." "Really?" Kelly asked in surprise. "Wow. Currently, NASA and the Soviet Space Service are both volunteering to aid in crewing the planned station and starships." Clark continued. "Its remit is simple. The SDF is going to be responsible for everything outside 10 planetary diameters of any inhabited planet being defined as either a world people, both human and Kryptonian, can live on without needing life support equipment, or any natural astronomical body with over 1 million people living on it." "A very well thought out definition," Hank mused. "How is the building of New Krypton going?" "Doing well, especially now that the Israelis are pitching in to help." Clark laughed. "The first stage of New Kandor is almost completed and the surrounding farms are being planted. Sounds like they'll soon be asking for a seat on the UN." Kelly joked and Clark shook his head. "There are plans for a new organization, the Solar Council, with each country getting a seat, but the votes weighted according to population and contributions to the Solar Defense Fleet as a percentage of GDP. Thus preventing the larger countries from using their size to block out the smaller but more willing countries." Hank realized. "Clever. Of course, that'll give New Kandor a very large boost for a while. Given where most of the technology is coming from, I don't really see the problem." Clark shrugged. Shouldn't you be out there soon?" Kelly glanced at his watch and nodded. "Thanks. All right, let's get this show on the road." "Hank. See you afterwards." Hank smiled as he adjusted his tie, then he strode out onto the stage to take his position beside the table of scrolls. Clark smiled and turned to rejoin his wife in the audience. "Duncan Matthews." A round of applause sounded as the captain of the school football team ascended the stairs to the platform. Clark used the cover of the applause to lean closer to Mystique. "Regretting that it isn't you up there handing over the scrolls." "A bit," Mystique admitted, her yellow eyes tracking the next graduate. "But then again, I think that what I currently have is more than enough." "And what is that?" Clark asked, his face a veritable study in innocence. Of course, Mystique wasn't fooled for an instant. "Stop fishing for compliments," she scolded, trying not to giggle, and Clark rubbed at where she had poked him. "You know what I'm talking about. Just checking that I'm somewhere near the top of the list." Clark smiled as he wrapped one arm around her. "I mean, you top my list." Mystique leaned her head against Clark's shoulder. "Don't worry, flyboy. You're at the top of my list too." Peter Parker. The round of applause was almost deafening as Peter, fully clad in his bodysuit but with his mask removed, strode to the base of the stage, then hopped up in a leap that very few non-enhanced humans would have been able to copy. Clark shook his head with an amused chuckle. "He's worse than Lance." Mystique chuckled, glancing across to where Avalanche was standing, his scroll in hand. "I wish I could disagree." Clark laughed. "Maybe being the second in a team will calm him down." "You mean that it's true?" Mystique gasped, then she shook her head. "Wow. Which team?" "The new one, the New York Guardians." Clark supplied, and Mystique frowned in thought before shrugging. "Well, at least he knows the area." "Hey, Aunt May." Peter grinned as he leaned across the table to give her a quick kiss on her cheek. "Peter." May smiled at her nephew. Congratulations. Thanks. Peter grinned, then he placed the scroll against his chest and webbed it into place. There, now I won't lose it. May gave a long-suffering sigh and shook her head. Hey, Peter. Mr. Wilson. Or should I call you Angel? Boss maybe. Samuel gave him a glare. I still don't know how I was persuaded to have you as my second in command. I must have been on medication or something. Hey. Peter protested. Lame jokes are my thing. Find your own style. The sad thing is, he's serious about that. Samuel stage whispered to May, who chuckled and swatted him playfully. Hey, Peter. Another voice said, and Edie Sawyer slipped through the crowd, one hand holding a cookie that she was nibbling on. Wow, if I'd known about these, I'd have enlisted with Xavier's bunch. Edie. Peter asked, and the redhead nodded. Wasn't your skin blue? Edie held up her other hand to show a familiar-looking bracelet. Powers cancelled. Hollow bracelet. Edie corrected. No way am I giving up my teleporting. Peter nodded in understanding. I hear you. I feel the same about my web slinging. And me about my flying. Samuel added. Professor, you called? Clark asked as he stepped up to beside the floating chair holding the founder of the X-Men. I did. Charles confirmed, and he indicated the two people before him. Clark, meet Tyrone Dietz and his mother, Mariah. Hello. Clark said, shaking Mariah's hand, then smiling at the wide-eyed child in his wheelchair. Wow. Tyrone gasped. You're super. Tyrone broke off in a series of racking coughs, and Mariah quickly put a handkerchief over his mouth until he managed to regain his breath. As she put the square of fabric away, Clark noticed several specks of blood on it. Tyrone was injured during the faked mutant attack, the one where we rescued Armor. Charles explained. Clark nodded, his thoughts briefly going to the mutant girl who had transferred to become a member of the Henshin Rangers rather than stay in America. He was hit by some core reactor debris from an exploding Sentinel. Charles continued. The doctors missed it until recently, but it has affected him on the genetic level, slowly unraveling his DNA. They have no idea of what to do other than try and keep him comfortable, so we're Tyrone's last hope. Clark nodded. All right. Ms. Dietz, will you be joining us at the Institute? Mariah nodded, although Clark could tell from her thermal signature that she was nervous. The first thing we do when we get there is get you a hover chair. Clark said, earning a grin from the young boy. However, I must point something out. Several of the students are mutants, but they don't want their identities released yet. Tyrone nodded. I understand. No spilling secret identities. Thank you. Clark smiled, then he turned to Mariah. May I ask what work skills you have? I used to work at a 7-Eleven. Excellent. Clark smiled. The Institute runs a small shop as a work experience and spending money resource, but we were having trouble finding someone to actually manage it. Do you think you could? Clark trailed off hopefully, and Mariah nodded. All right. Thanks. Hey bro. Congrats. Alex called, and his hangers-on looked round to see Cyclops strolling over. Hey, little brother. Scott laughed. Enjoying your newfound fame? Hell, yeah. Alex grinned. More than worth the extra responsibilities. Yeah. Scott smiled, then he sobered. We're getting a couple of new guests, a kid named Tyrone and his mom, both normals, but Tyrone's ill. We're talking seriously ill, possibly fatal. Palladium poisoning amongst other things. Clark and Forge are making him their next project. Really? Alex asked, all trace of levity gone. Oh hell, poor kid. He transferring to Bayville. Scott nodded. I'll mentor him. Alex stated. Anyone gives him a hard time, they'll answer to me. Scott rested his hand on Alex's shoulder. Thanks bro, Speak said the same thing. Don't worry about today, though. He's already heading back with Clark. You'll meet him this evening. Alex nodded. Thanks. In the meantime, I'm sure your newfound harem will cheer you up. Scott joked, then he leapt back laughing to avoid Alex's punch. Will you be going public when you graduate? Amanda asked as she stole a cookie from her boyfriend's plate. I don't know. Kurt replied quietly. I will see when it happens, but... Amanda caught his eye and smiled understandingly. It's your choice, Kurt. She whispered, hugging him. What do you think? Well, Amanda mused, part of me wants the world to know just how awesome my boyfriend is while part of me wants to keep my personal plushie to myself. Being personal plushie is sounding better and better. Kurt whispered into her ear and she giggled. And the headlines tonight. The distinguished-looking newsreader said. The identities of Cyclops and Spider-Man are revealed. War breaks out as Palestine is invaded. The United Nations passes a resolution confirming the Solarian Defense Force's total neutrality. This is the news at 6. Our lead story tonight. Scott Summers is Cyclops while Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Both revealed their identities today at their graduation from Bayville High. And 2 more heroes emerge into the light. Wilson Fisk mused. Smythe. Already collating the search results, sir. The wheelchair-bound man said absently. Which one do you want first? Spider-Man. He has proven quite annoying in the past. Smythe winced as he looked at the screen, an action that didn't evade Fisk's attention. Smythe. Yes, sir. Spider-Man, also known as Peter Parker. Son of Richard and Mary Parker, both deceased. Raised by Ben Parker and May Parker, Ben Parker was killed by a carjacker who was caught soon after in Spider-Man's first foray into crime fighting. Ironically, the carjacker had robbed the manager of a wrestling ring who had refused to pay Peter his winnings for beating the then champion. Interesting. Wilson murmured. I wonder if he feels that he could have stopped the thief and saved his uncle's life. It would explain why he tries so hard to be a hero, some sort of self-imposed penance. Quite possible, sir. Smythe agreed, making a note. He was recruited into the Xavier Institute for the Gifted, but continued his crime-fighting career. After-action reports from several criminals who went up against him suggest that he gained an upgrade from Superman in the form of a bulletproof outfit. Very likely. Fisk agreed. Please continue. Although he didn't participate in most of the more notable missions due to his independent hero career, he was part of the strike force that defeated the Sentinel assault on the White House. He also participated in the off-world mission which occurred simultaneously with the events surrounding the cure. Apparently they took down a megalomaniac just before he gained deity-level powers. Just before he gained deity-level powers. Fisk repeated and Smythe nodded. I have my sources researching that now, sir. May I continue? Fisk motioned for him to continue his report. After that mission, Spider-Man returned to his normal pattern until recently, when he was recruited to become part of the New York Guardians, a team led by Samuel Wilson, formerly the Falcon and now Angel 2. Peter's only family is his aunt who is living at the Xavier Institute where she works as the archivist or librarian. Sources are unclear as to that. Possibility of a successful hit on her are very low. Possibility of doing so and escaping retaliation from the X-Men and their allies is problematic. At this time, we have no usable leverage. Damn. Fisk said calmly. And Cyclops? Yes, sir. Scott Summers, also known as Cyclops. Primary power is optic blasts controlled and directed by his visor. Previously unable to control his ability without either his visor or special ruby glasses, he recently gained finer control to the point that he does not need either to restrain his optic blasts. Fisk leaned back and interlaced his fingers as Smythe continued his report. The annoyance had become part of a team. He might need a team of his own to counter them. Smythe. I want you to locate certain individuals for me. Chapter 28, A Sinister Group. Gentlemen, welcome. Kingpin said as he looked at the 6 supervillains stood before him. As I am sure that you have already guessed, I have a proposition for you. Wilson Fisk paused for dramatic effect even as his gaze swept across the group. Dr. Otto Octavius looked unreadable behind his shades, but the twitching of his artificial tentacles made guessing his dominant emotions easy for those who had studied him. Beside him was Eddie Brock, almost unrecognizable as a human due to his symbiotic covering, while Sandman loomed behind them. To one side, Alexei Saitsevuk, better known as Rhino, shifted impatiently in his stylized mech armor, uncaring that Adrian Toombs, better known as the Vulture, was perched on his shoulder. The final member was even less readable than Otto due to the near-spherical helmet he wore atop his green armor, a helmet which Wilson knew was liberally festooned on the inside with data screens and was controlled by eye tracking and facial twitches. The six of you have capabilities that complement each other's strengths while covering their weaknesses. In addition, you have all got something in common, the desire for money. Money that I can provide. As a show of faith, I have already placed $100,000 each into your primary bank accounts. He's telling the truth, Mysterio said in an echoing voice. I just checked my account and the money is there. Same here, Dr. Octopus said, returning a small computer tablet to his inner coat pocket. You have our attention, Mr. Fisk. Who do you need taking down? Eventually, Spider-Man. Fisk growled. He has become a nuisance. He has recently been revealed to be a student named Peter Parker. Parker? Octavius said in surprise. I remember him from when I was teaching. He was a very bright young man. He has joined a new team, the New York Guardians, which is annoying. Fisk said. A certain acquaintance of mine wishes to know the secret of Spider-Man's powers. Your mission is simple. Capture him if possible for a full medical analysis. If you cannot, then kill him and return with his body, or at least several DNA samples so that they can be analyzed. Why not just shoot him? Vulture asked and Fisk sighed. He has some kind of limited precognition. He dodged the bullets. That will complicate things. Otto mused. I will need to work on the plan, but it would seem that a basic converging strategy would be for the best. Hey, Venom rumbled. Would it help you if we told you that we were once linked to Spider-Man? It was while he still lived in Queens, but he rejected us and so we joined with Brock and became Venom. We know his powers, he cannot sense us when we attack. Fisk's eyebrows shot up even as Otto smirked. Yes, that does help. I think a hostage situation would be feasible. I will need to see your files on him, Mr. Fisk, but I think he does indeed have a relative that we can target to get to him. I will have a copy of the files assembled by Smythe on Parker delivered to you within the hour. Fisk nodded and pressed a button to summon one of his underlings. I have prepared a temporary hideout for you. This man will take you there. If you like it, then maybe we can make this arrangement more than a one-time thing. Much appreciated, Mr. Fisk. Otto said. Once we get there, we will certainly discuss our future prospects. Who made you leader? Rhino grunted and Otto turned to face him. No one, but when we get there, I believe that leadership will be one of the things that we should discuss, along with a general idea of our powers and abilities. Well, Octavius has my vote. Mysterio commented as he moved towards the door. We can work with him. Venom growled as he stalked out of the office. For now. I'm in. Sandman grinned as he walked out, small grains of sand rolling after him. I believe that our newfound comrades have the right idea, Rhino. Vulture mused. Come, let us hasten to inspect our newly acquired abode. Huh. Vulture sighed. Dumb it down, Adrian, dumb it down. Rhino, let's go check our new digs. Why didn't you say that before? Rhino rumbled as he quickly strode out of the office, Vulture ducking before he could be knocked off by the top of the door frame. Whoa! Rhino muttered as he clambered out of the lorry and looked around the cavernous warehouse. Nice. The Kingpin arranged for these 3 warehouses to be linked and refitted, said the driver as he climbed out of his cab. To the left is the living areas with the bedrooms, bathrooms, fully stocked kitchen, and recreational area including a gym. To the right is the work area, outfitted with the latest in technology should you need to upgrade or create anything new. There are several tunnels linking to the subways, the docks and other areas. My wings could use a bit of tweaking. Toombs noted as he started towards the right. Otto. I'll get my things put away first so that I don't forget to do it later. Otto said and Adrian paused, then turned round. Good point. Me too. Rhino grunted and lumbered towards the archway through which the kitchen was visible. I'm hungry. Then after we have consumed our midday repasts, we shall confer. Otto said, and Rhino gave him a confused look. He said we'll talk after lunch. Vulture supplied and Rhino nodded. Okay. Damn it. Five heads snapped round as Otto stalked into the main area of the base. We may have a problem getting to Spider-Man's aunt, she is residing at the Xavier Institute. So we just smash our way in. Rhino shrugged, but Mysterio made a negating motion with his hands. I have seen the defenses of the Institute while I was seeking new technology. Not even all of us together would be able to pass the walls, let alone get into the mansion. Even if we did, the mansion is the home of the X-Men and they are not to be underestimated. I believe that Superman is linked to the place as well. Vulture noted. A long silence fell, then Rhino bashed his metal fists together. I smash him too. Tomb's face palmed, causing Rhino to give him a confused look. Rhino, Superman is so strong that he could rip your suit apart in seconds. Not even your missiles would hurt him. My what? Tombs slumped. Dear Lord. You mean you didn't even bother to read the instructions when you grabbed the suit. Otto tapped Rhino's shoulder with a tentacle. I believe that I should examine this suit of yours at the earliest possible moment. It obviously has more functions than you believe. He wants to see if your suit is even more awesome than you think it is and then tell you how to use all the awesomeness. Tombs translated without bothering to look at Rhino's confused expression. I will research our adversaries. Mysterio announced as he faded out of sight. I hate it when he does that. Sandman grumped. So? Otto Octavius said, looking round at the assembled villains. Our original thought was to seize Parker's aunt and hold her to force him to come to us. Given what Mysterio has uncovered about how fast other teams can respond and how many favors Xavier can call in, I think that we can agree that the plan is a non-starter. Rhino sulked as everyone else nodded. On the plus side, Otto continued, we have managed to reconstruct the dozen or so favorite patrol routes that he has. Victor, I believe that you should take over now. Thank you, Otto. Victor said as he stood up and ran a hand over his bald head. Using our enhanced mobility, Otto and I placed several remote cameras around Manhattan in strategic locations. These cameras coupled with the information that the Kingpin gave us means that we can predict where Parker will be with a high degree of confidence over the next few days. We have identified 3 routes that take Parker past a certain bank. We intend for Rhino to rob it. The other villains looked confused and Otto smirked. Parker is used to working alone. Unless he thinks he's outmatched, he probably won't call for help. Once Rhino has engaged him, we can move in and herd him into a pre-positioned trap, allowing us to capture him. Once he is secure, we can throw him in a van and let the Kingpin's ally do whatever he wants with that damned wall crawler. Do we know who this ally is? Sandman asked and Mysterio bowed slightly. Yes. He goes by the name Jackal and is a gifted geneticist. Interesting, but not very germane to this conversation. Otto stated, catching their attention. The map, please. Mysterio gestured and the table seemed to shimmer before rising into a 3-dimensional map of Manhattan with several buildings pulsing in blue, as well as several trails of golden light weaving between the towers. This is the Angel's Rest, the headquarters of the New York Guardians. Otto said, using one tentacle to point to it. The light strings are the routes usually taken by Parker on his patrol. We will deploy near the bank and wait to see which route Parker takes. If he takes one of these 3 routes, we will continue the plan, otherwise we fall back for the day. Assuming that he sticks to the routes, Rhino will go in when Parker is less than a minute away from the bank. Galatea rose from her bed and stood still, the metal contacts on her forehead gleaming in the low light. As the lights rose, the bands of circuitry reaching from the contacts round the back of her head came into view, as did the contacts on the backs of her hands and the strips of circuitry extending from them to underneath her blue and purple bodysuit. She is prepared, my lord. Sinister said with a deep bow as he stood aside to let Apocalypse enter. The suicide device that Magneto had implanted into her has been removed and the control systems optimized for her physiology. Excellent. Apocalypse rumbled as he slowly circled the unmoving clone, examining her closely. The control systems have been reinforced against damage due to her powers being best for melee combat. Sinister continued. I have also managed to slightly boost her strength and power. Although not at your level, she should be more than a match for any Kryptonian. Apocalypse nodded as his gaze traveled down to Galatia's boots, then up again to her raised collar. And my other 2 horsemen. Sinister bowed again. They are waiting in the next chambers, my lord. Magneto rose from his bed and stood still, his cape rippling slightly and his helmet floating above his head. On his forehead were 2 contacts that had a line of circuitry extending round the back of his head. Magneto, my lord. Sinister said from the door. I did not need to do anything to his powers as he is an Omega-class mutant himself, although his mental issues mean that he rarely used more than a tithe of his power. Apocalypse nodded thoughtfully as he looked at the white-haired figure. You have done well, my Sanes Chell. And what of those who followed him? Mostly captured by the authorities, my lord, with the rest in hiding. Once they see him by your side, they will reappear and ask to serve you. Apocalypse smirked. As they should. Yes, my lord. The figure standing in the middle of the room seemed to ripple and flow as its surface contours kept changing. One moment, it was a tall, blonde male, then a short, red-headed woman. Morph, formerly a member of X-Force until I managed to capture him. Sinister said unprompted. His original power set was rather uninspiring. He could transform himself to look like other people, just like Mystique can. I took that power and enhanced it. Now, he can absorb DNA samples and transform himself into a physical clone of that person, complete with any natural powers that they possess. Right now, he is integrating the looks and powers of every mutant who has been through the cure process. A truly fascinating ability. Apocalypse finally stated. I have yet to work out how to let him use more than one power set at a time without risking him destabilizing. Sinister admitted ruefully. It matters not, my Sanes Chell. Apocalypse stated. Know that I am pleased with your work. Thank you, my lord. Apocalypse started to turn, then paused. With the new powers you have gifted him, he should have a new name also. From this day forth, he is Apophyse. Chapter 29, Welcome to my parlor. Peter laughed as he danced through the air. Below him, the river of humanity that was rush hour flowed with a kind of glacial inevitability, but even from his rapidly changing angle he could see the differences that had occurred over the previous week. When he had accepted the offer to join the Guardians, Xavier had removed the Spider-Man action figures and other Spider-Man paraphernalia from the shop that the Institute had recently opened in Bayville, now run by Mariah Dietz and which served as invaluable work experience for anyone hoping to get into retail. Within a week, new figures, updated with his new shoulder patch, appeared in Bayville as well as in the shop that had been set up in the lobby of the skyscraper that held the Angel's Rest at its top. The other members also had their own action figures, as did the unfortunately deceased Angel, but the sales figures showed that Peter was currently the most popular by a significant margin. Samuel's reaction to the first week's sales figures had been rather amusing. Spinning through the air, Peter fired another web line and swooped down, waving at a young boy who was clad in an official replica Spider-Man bodysuit of his very own. The boy waved back even as his mother looked up and smiled at him. Then his arc carried him high enough that he could fire another web line to send him soaring higher, continuing his aerial ballet amongst the buildings of Manhattan, buildings that occasionally held large posters of the New York Guardians. He's taking Route 7. Mysterio's voice sounded over the radio. At current speeds, I estimate he will reach the target area within 10 minutes. Excellent. Vulture said, then he glanced across at where Rhino was sat against the side of the van, a device that Otto had made for him clutched in his mechanical hands. Alexei, get ready. Hold on. Rhino said, absently, his attention fully transfixed by the device. What are you doing, anyway? Vulture queried, squirming out of the driver's seat and into the back. Half standing, he leaned across so that he could see what Rhino was so intent on. Almost. Rhino whispered, then he tapped a button. Vulture's eyebrows shot up as on the screen, a red-cheeked yellow mouse suddenly vanished into a red and white ball which rocked a few times before settling. Got him. Rhino exulted. Just gotta name him, then I'll save and be ready to go. Vulture nodded, then turned to where his wing pack was hanging. Unhooking it, he started to struggle into it. Saved. Rhino said, placing the modified Game Boy into a small compartment in his armor. Okay, ready to kick spider butt. Hey, Tombs, don't spiders normally spin web from their butts? Vulture froze in the middle of snapping closed the fasteners that secured his wing pack. Yes. Then how does Spider-Man fire it from his wrists? Adrian Toombs blinked several times. I don't actually know. Otto raised the welding mask and looked closely at the final anchor point. After a few moments, he nodded and then used his tentacles to descend back down to the ground. I cannot reinforce it further without altering the buildings themselves, and there is no time for that, he stated, unhooking the straps that held the tanks for the welding torch. I only hope that it is strong enough. We think it will hold for as long as it needs to. Venom hissed as he crawled down the wall on the other side of the alley. Otto nodded, then looked round. Mysterio, if you would be so kind. The bars seemed to ripple slightly, then they slowly faded out of sight, leaving the alley looking as if it were still open to the sky. Now all we need to do is get into our positions and get ready for our allies to return with our target. Venom, are you ready to do your part? As soon as he is in, we will use our webs to close the entrance. Venom nodded. Excellent. Otto almost purred, then he looked round as Mysterio rippled into visibility. They have begun. Rhino charged in through the doors to the bank, tearing them off their hinges. Without slowing down, he sprinted straight through the line of tellers' desks, leaving a massive hole in his wake, then slammed through the wall into the bank manager's office. Where's the vault? He roared, then he paused. Rhino, Spider-Man just landed outside, fight him but remember the plan. Rhino spun round and growled as he saw the silhouette of the man who had dropped him into an icy lake months prior. With a slight movement of his head, he prepped and launched one of the missiles stored in his shoulder pauldrons. Nice. He laughed as the smoke trail whipped round to follow Spider-Man, then a flash of light marked its detonation. Did I hit him? No, he threw a brick at it. New, get out here and follow the plan. Vulture snapped and Rhino dropped to all fours, accelerating out of the bank as he did so. Where is he? He shouted, then he almost stumbled as something hit him. The bastard's on my back, isn't he? Why, yes. Yes he is. Toombs replied, his voice showing his amusement. Turn left and run as fast as you can. Rhino obeyed the directions, his teeth gritting as a voice shouted yeehaw. Right Spidey. I'm gonna kill him. He snarled. We'll see. Next right. Rhino slammed into the wall as he turned, then used his augmented vision screens to see if he'd scraped his rider off. He's still there. Vulture supplied. Not helping. Vulture's laughter echoed across the comm as a line of webbing blocked the view of one of the cameras embedded in the faceplate. With another snarl, Rhino angled across the street and into the alleyway. Get off of me! He roared as he skidded to a halt before trying to use his arms to swat Spider-Man. Another web line cut his vision in half, then a tentacle swept across, smashing into the wall. Spinning round, Rhino looked round quickly, then he looked up even as multiple thwips marked Venom's contribution to the trap. Parker. Otto said in greeting. You were a superior student when I taught, so I would like to offer you this chance to surrender peacefully. Do so and I promise that we shall not injure or kill you and you will soon be released. Dr. Octavius. Peter queried. Wow. What happened? A minor accident during the testing of one of my inventions. Otto replied. Will you surrender? Why should I? Peter laughed as he leapt across the alley and swarmed up the wall, only to pause as the bars just below roof height rippled into view. This is going to suck, isn't it? Parker. Venom hissed and Peter inhaled sharply. No. I got rid of you. You rejected us, Parker. Venom hissed as he crouched. We are now Venom and you will pay for insulting us. Peter hurled himself to one side as Venom leapt at him, then ricocheted off the wall just in time to avoid a sudden wave of sand. What the heck? He yelped as Sandman reformed. Four of you. Rhino clenched his fists, leaving his pinkies sticking out, and the armor plating on his arms shifted to reveal the inbuilt guns. Taking aim, he opened fire, only for Parker to flip away a bare instant before the bullets chewed into the wall. "You know, I called my friends," Peter called as he bounced around the enclosed alley, just managing to keep ahead of the bullet stream. "They should be here soon. But I have concealed us. They will not find you," a new sourceless voice said, and Parker briefly face-palmed. "Goldfish Bowl? That you? That's Mysterio," the annoyed villain shouted. "So, Venom, Doc Ock, Sandy, Rhino and Goldfish Bowl?" Peter managed to sigh while somersaulting over Rhino's head. "So, the felony is 5. We prefer the Sinister 6. Otto said as he ducked out of the way. "Damn it, Rhino. Watch where you're pointing those things." Rhino snarled, then blinked as the guns stopped firing. "What happened?" "You are out of ammunition." "Thankfully," Otto explained. "Now if you would, please leave the rest of the mission to those of us with more than 3 brain cells." Rhino snarled as Otto used his tentacles to swing up to the higher reaches of the alley, working to reduce the space available for Peter to dodge in. At the same time, Venom started to fire webbing at the evading hero. Not good. Peter swore as he tried to avoid the attacks that for some reason he couldn't sense. "Where is he?" Samuel worried as he looped round, scanning the alleys below for any sign of his missing 2IC. "I can't see him," Firestar called as she drifted across the sky. "Anyone?" "Sorry, still getting my breath," Telegirl panted, then a new voice sounded. "Daredevil here, I can feel where he is, heading there now." Samuel triggered the HUD to highlight Daredevil's location even as he pulled up into an Immelman turn. "Watch out." Samuel flipped into a wing-over as another winged figure slashed through the space he had just vacated. Spinning to face it, he found himself staring at a bald man clad in a green jumpsuit and wing pack almost identical to the one he had used to wear. "Damn it," he muttered, then he triggered his COMM. "Matt, you're in charge. I'm gonna be busy with the knockoff up here." "Understood." Daredevil sprinted across the rooftops, using his parkour and free-running skills to cover the distance between him and his teammate as quickly as he could when he felt Peter slam into the ground and stop moving. "Shit." Peter groaned as the world slowly stopped spinning and then his mask was torn away. "We need to hurry," Mysterio stated. "My cameras have picked up Daredevil, he will arrive here in under a minute." "I have this," Otto said as he carefully rolled Peter's sleeve up to where Venom's webbing had stuck him to the ground. Producing a syringe, he carefully inserted the needle into Peter's vein and pulled back the plunger, filling the glass tube with Peter's blood. "I have a blood sample." Peter bit back an exclamation of pain as Venom yanked out a hank of his hair. Otto held out a plastic bag and Venom placed the hairs into it. "Let's get moving." Venom nodded, then punched down, sending Peter into blackness. Matt Murdock swung down to land at the mouth of the alley. Even as the monomolecular cord of his multifunction staff retracted, he sprinted into the alley and knelt by Peter's side. Dropping his staff, he touched Peter's neck, then sighed with relief. "All points, I've found him. He seems to be webbed down, but it doesn't feel like his webbing. He's out cold, but no apparent injuries. The winged person just bugged out too, went down an alleyway and I lost him." Samuel transmitted. "I'm homing in on your location now." Matt nodded as he started to check Peter over more thoroughly, making certain that he didn't have any broken bones. "Gentlemen, a toast," Otto said as he lifted his wine glass. "To the Sinister 6, may we have many more profitable missions." "To us." The other 5 chorused and Victor Toombs leaned over. "I assume that Fisk was happy." He agreed that our actions were wise. Otto stated. "We secured samples for his tame geneticist and proved that we could work together for a common goal. As long as we don't have to go against Superman or any of his kind." Toombs nodded. "Angel 2 was tough enough. Bastard was more agile than I was." "Then I will be happy to help you upgrade your wings," Otto replied, earning a nod of thanks. "Alexei." The hulking man looked up from his dish of strawberry meringue and ice cream. "Huh. My contacts have supplied me with designs for a small impulse cannon similar to the ones Iron Man uses. Otto stated. If I replace your arm guns with them, you won't have to worry about running out of ammo again. Alexei grinned. Nice. I also have a plan for fixing 6 of them together to form something similar to a Gatling gun. Otto added. It'll give you a lot of offensive power while the power cells last. Alexei's grin grew wider. Ow. Peter forced his eyes open and found himself looking at a featureless white ceiling. Hey, the Sleeping Beauty awakes. A teasing voice he didn't recognize said, and Peter managed to roll his head, only to blink in shock. I think I hit my head or something because, well, you're green. I sure am. Jennifer grinned. Angel said that you guys could use another heavy hitter given what happened to you, so here I am. Plus, it lets me finish taking my law degree since Matt can help me. Peter blinked a few times, then he smiled. Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Nice to meet you. Jennifer Walters, She-Hulk. The Green Lady replied with a wide grin. Looking forwards to working with you. Chapter 30, Plans in Potentia. How goes the mission, my Sanes Chell? Sinister turned and bowed to his master. The last of your Golem army is in transit now, my lord. The containers holding them will reach port within a week. Apocalypse nodded with a triumphant smirk. And the Sentinels? We have been unable to gain access to Master Mold itself, but all the other new Sentinels have had the program that I mentioned before installed, my lord. Sinister stated. Once you give the order, they will flock to your banner and each day, another dozen are created. Excellent. Apocalypse gloated. I also found out something quite interesting and rather useful, my lord. Sinister offered. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated by the group known as Hydra. Their leader is the Red Skull. I was part of the project that granted him his enhanced abilities. Apocalypse raised a quizzical brow and Sinister grinned triumphantly. I implanted a series of hypnotic commands into him during the infusion of the serum. I had believed that it was a wasted effort since he seemed to die in World War II, but he recently returned and one activated him. Johann. Apocalypse turned as a new figure entered. The person entering the room was clad in a long leather greatcoat that reached down to mid-shin with military-style boots and trousers visible under the hem. The coat itself was secured by a thick belt which had a metal buckle upon which was engraved a skull surrounded by tentacles. However, the man's face was what caught Apocalypse's attention. His head was blood red with only slits for a nose, while his brows, eye sockets, and cheekbones were pronounced enough that his head did indeed resemble a red skull. The new arrival snapped to attention and raised his right arm in a salute. Johann Schmidt is devoted to the concept of rule through advanced technology. Sinister explained. At my request, he has prepared the moles in S.H.I.E.L.D. ready for when you choose to take control of the 3 Sky Dreadnoughts that are almost complete. He had his own plans, but they relied too heavily on control of the skyships, so I absorbed them into your plans, my lord. Excellent work, my Sanes Chell. Once again, you surpass even my expectations. Apocalypse stated as he slowly circled the Red Skull, examining him. Red Skull, as sinister as my hand, performing the more delicate tasks I require, you shall become my fist, smashing those who would oppose me. J.A., main hair. Red Skull replied, gazing fearlessly at the taller metahuman. Nyemen Salim Wegstihan. Apocalypse's smirk grew. Indeed, and I am certain that you will make that true. J.A., main hair. And with the deployment of the newly formed 1st Metahuman Company of the United States Army, the forces invading the new state of Palestine have been forced to retreat. The reporter said as, in the background behind him, a large, jubilant crowd waved American flags intermixed with the black, white, green, and red flag of the state of Palestine. The use of metahumans in a military environment was first pioneered by the independent nation of Genosha, which uses mixed human and metahuman response units. However, despite the overwhelming success in Palestine, protests against using so-called unnatural powers to safeguard American interests have already sprung up in the USA. The screen muted and Dr. Doom leaned back in his throne, steepling his fingers. Fascinating, and unexpected. I was almost certain that the American government would either ignore or actively suppress those with powers. Father, Connor von Doom offered diffidently, what if the use of powers is one step towards controlling them? How long before all mutants are expected to enroll in the military as soon as their powers activate, forced to use their powers only as the government decides? Doom nodded slowly as he followed his son's logic. That is quite possible. It is the fear of uncontrolled power that leads governments to strike out, having those with powers answering to them and actively taking out those who do not conform. It is more ruthless than I thought America was capable of. Stryker. Father. General Stryker. Doom explained. A man who hates mutants, mainly because of how his own son abused his powers, but if he is responsible for this, if he has decided to turn his energies from destroying mutant kind to enslaving it instead, I can see only two outcomes. Either America ends up ruling the world, or it will erupt in a civil war between those who enlist and those who refuse. I think that I may need to send Cynthia to contact my agents. General. The president smiled as Stryker entered the Oval Office. Congratulations, your project was a total success. Have a seat, do you want a coffee? Thank you, Mr. President. Stryker said, bowing as he sat down. I am glad that my suggestion worked. Oh, it worked. The president laughed. The former leaders of Hamas and Fatah have both agreed to let our forces set up bases to help protect them. Heck, after your people saved them from being annexed by all their neighbors, there's a movement forming that wants Palestine to become our 51st state. Can you believe that? It would certainly help us from a strategic viewpoint, almost certainly better than our alliance with Israel did. Stryker noted as one of the Secret Service agents passed him a cup of coffee. I wouldn't advise trying to force it, though. My advisors say the same thing. The president agreed, pausing to take a sip from his own coffee. Now if only we could get a Kryptonian to join. I hear that S.H.I.E.L.D. have one. They do, but only as a semi-independent contractor affiliated to S.W.O.R.D. Stryker supplied. Besides, even Kryptonians can only be in one place at a time. The first meta-human company has 3 mutants capable of duplicating themselves. Another can teleport the equivalent of a shipping container to anywhere in the world as long as he knows where it needs to go, while one of them, veteran, can copy his combat experience to other mutants, meaning that we can give them a decade's training in just a few days. My aides are looking for more ways to maximize the strategic advantages presented by the different powers of mutants. And half of them were already in the military, allowing you to deploy them without needing more training. The president added, waving at a folder on his desk. Stryker, you and your people did good. Thank you, sir. Stryker said with a polite smile. However, the very totality of their success has me worried. We've already seen at the Battle of the Cure how dangerous those with powers can be. We need to know who has powers and what they are in order to ensure the continued security of our country. The president nodded slowly. You have a point, but how easy would it be for my successor, whoever it will be, to abuse such a list? To decide that the people on it aren't allowed to live free, but must become slaves instead? And what would happen if they decided to fight back? How much damage could they do if they think that they have nothing to lose? Stryker paused. He hadn't expected the president to hold back like that given the success in Palestine. Perhaps a slightly more subtle approach was needed. After all, although it would take 6 months, all of the FMC members would be permanently loyal to him, thanks to the implanted chips. And when they were, then it would be time to move ahead with his plans. Banshee. Wolverine. The new arrival said, then the two men grinned at each other. Hey, Moira. Logan added, leaning slightly to look round the taller man. Logan. She replied with an expression of fond exasperation. Leave the luggage, the kids LL take them to your quarters. Logan stated, waving the watchers forwards. Chuck wants to talk to you. Sean, welcome back. Moira, it is good to see you again. T. It's good to be back. Sean agreed, accepting the proffered cup. Yevee resurrected THA X-Force. I call them the X-Men. Charles corrected gently. I was able to avoid most of the pitfalls this time and the balance of the team is much better. I'm sure that having Superman helping to train them made a difference. Moira offered and Charles smiled. More than you can imagine. I heard he ain't an X-Man. Sean commented before taking another sip of his tea, and Charles nodded. He explained his reasons to me and I found them very logical. You know that only 3 countries have not offered him citizenship? North Korea, Latvia, and Iran all declined, although Doom's daughter explained to the UN that her father saw Clark as being his equal, therefore offering him citizenship would effectively be an attempt to reduce his standing in Dr. Doom's eyes. Clark is instead listed as a revered guest in Latvia instead. That takes some serious balls. Sean marveled. Sean. Moira protested even as she struggled to hide her grin, then she paused. By the way, who was the boy in the hover chair? The reason that I'm glad you decided to come. Xavier said quietly. His name is Tyrone Dietz and he really needs your medical skills. Moira put her cup down and leaned forwards. Tell me more. Stryker looked round at the bustling underground laboratory even as he stepped down off the teleportation dais. General Stryker. Welcome to Advanced Idea Mechanics Primary Base. A bald man in a suit said, and Stryker nodded to him. Baron Strucker. Strucker nodded back and then adjusted his monocle. Thank you for coming. I believe that you will appreciate what we have developed for you. Stryker glanced round at the bustling cavern, then strode after Strucker. Better make it fast, I only have another 30 minutes before I need to return to my office. Of course. Strucker said as he stopped at a large door. Waving his hand across a sensor set in the door frame, he stepped through as the door irised open. You wanted a way to counter the Kryptonians, General. We have developed one for you. Stryker stepped through the door and came to a halt, staring at the thing before him. Slowly rotating in the middle of a large transparent cylinder, it looked like a silver cylinder with external conduits attached almost at random until its rotation turned it enough that he could see a distorted face that took up almost a quarter of the cylinder, a face that had a pair of underdeveloped arms to either side just below mouth level and atrophied legs protruding near the base of the cylinder. May I present to you Modok, the mechanized organism designed to outmaneuver Kryptonians. Strucker stated with pride. We used the biocomputer that we managed to acquire a while back and combined it with one of our employees, George Tarleton. Several support systems and input/output devices later, the result is the being you see before you. Our tests have proven that he has an incredible intellect, strong Schnick capabilities and multitasking capabilities previously unmatched by anything we have created before. He can pursue at least 14 separate subjects simultaneously without any loss of mental coherency. In another month, his reprogramming will be complete and you will have a weapon you can use. I wanted something that could stand up to a Kryptonian. Stryker pointed out and Strucker nodded. And so he can. Not physically, we are nowhere near working out how to program a Kryptonian clone to be loyal, but mentally he is far superior. His neurons work by biooptics, meaning that his thoughts literally move at light speed. In one-on-one combat, he is indeed no match for a Kryptonian, but as a source of strategic and tactical superiority. Strucker tailed off and Stryker slowly nodded. I see your point, Baron. Strucker smirked. Thank you. You military types do tend to think in bigger gun terms, sometimes other factors are just as important. So he is programmed for strategy and tactics. Not just that. Strucker said, looking at the floating bioconstruct again. We uploaded everything that affects warfare into him. Chemistry, physics, biology, psychology, neurology, geography, computing, politics, public relations, we chose not to limit him to pure combat. Place him in charge and he'll get the civilian population rising in your favor. And before you wonder about his loyalty, we have over here a device that can be used to reprogram his core directives as needed. Excellent. Stryker said with a predatorial grin. Excellent. Check the description for the links to the author.